Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Workshop 212 on promoting innovation and entrepreneurship in the Global South. Good morning to all of us here in the room. We know it's a bit small, but we like this environment. We think it'll make us have very productive conversations en famille. And also a pleasant good morning to our online viewers. My name is Kevon Swift. I work with LACNIC, and I'll be your moderator for this collective discussion that we are having on the topic. And to start off, to set the context, I think that there are two central concepts that we must keep in mind when we are thinking about innovation and entrepreneurship. And these two central concepts, they really deal with questions of value and risk. When we talk about value, for instance, does passion about an idea suffice? Do our innovators and entrepreneurs understand value creation, the characteristics of critical stakeholder groups? Do they fully grasp their environments? And then also on the question of risk, what we really want to find out is, how do you manage risk for things that haven't been done before, things without precedent? I think these are some of the critical concepts that we have to keep in mind. And these distinguish these concepts of innovation and entrepreneurship from just regular creativity and regular business activity. And of course, at this workshop, we are clearly interested in ICT and ICT-enabled innovation. We are talking about how the internet economy can solve or at least meet some of the SDGs in our countries in the Global South. And the Global South in itself isn't a concept that we have put without coincidence. The Global South, it really positions us to not really accept settled categories of the definitions of innovation systems. It takes, for example, it takes into consideration what we would call non-traditional sources of information, the value of traditional knowledge, and how these plays in innovations within the Global South. So without further ado, we'll go into today's session. We'll first start with a number of opening remarks from some very distinguished speakers we have with us today. And then we are going to move into a group discussion en famille on two particular questions. The first question deals with the challenges and opportunities for innovation and entrepreneurship in the Global South. And then the second question, we really deal about the success cases that we have all worked on or that we know of, and we will try and share some of those lessons among us en famille. So at this point in time, I will call on my panelists to my left, Joyce, hi Joyce, to please get us started with some reflections.
Buenos días todos. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joyce Donnier. I'm with Internet Society. I'm Senior Director of Global Engagement with Internet Society. And first of all, thank you for inviting me here and on this very important topic. It's a topic that is very close to the heart of the Internet Society, as we think that obviously without innovation, we would not be here talking about the internet. So we continued in that spirit, and we still continue in that spirit in promoting innovation and entrepreneurship, and to make sure the next big thing is coming out there as well. I'll just want to touch upon a couple of things around the topic, setting the scene, and maybe at a bit of a higher level to start with before we dive into the more concrete discussions. So what we're seeing is that entrepreneurship is really surging in the developing countries. In India, we see major ecosystems, startup ecosystems. In New Delhi and Bangalore, for example, we see that the startups have been raising 1.5 billion in funding in 2016, only for their startups. Sao Paulo ranks among the top 20 startup ecosystems, where we see more than 1,500 active startups in the city alone. Nairobi, as you all probably well know, is the home of leading African startups such as Ushahidi, such as M-Pesa, Brick, and so on. I'm only naming a few. I know there's many more, but we'll go into that. So what we see that if local entrepreneurs develop new business solutions that address local demands, that is really, really key. So for example, if you look at Kenya, Mkopa, the solar energy rent-to-buy system, is really addressing an important energy issue at local level. And so they really looked at finding solutions for something that was real in their own local environment. These ventures are only possible thanks to the internet now. So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. What we've seen is that access, if you leave access to an open, trusted internet, you can remove barriers to entrepreneurship and create new opportunities in a different ways for entrepreneurship and innovation. I mean, I'll just say one thing. I mean, one thing you can do when going to the internet, you don't really have to ask anyone for permission to start your business. You can just go ahead. You can just start. There's another range of issues that we will dive into, but you can just use the internet to start innovating. And so when you look at how the more physical environment works in terms of startups, and I just wanted to make that parallel, when you look at the Silicon Valleys, and I need to be careful what I say because we have some people in the room who are kind of there. But so the key in the hubs there, in the ICT clusters, is that you have access to three main things. One is knowledge, education and research, basically through the universities that are around or in the ICT cluster. You have access to input, so you have an easy, I wouldn't say it's easy, but you have at least access to potential funding. And you have a whole range of other people that are living that same enthusiasm for innovation, that are struggling potentially with the same issues, so you can share, you can share skills as well. So there's a pool of people you can actually tap into. Now, if we all know the stories of Steve Jobs and the garage and the Googles and the Facebooks, I won't go there. But we also know the stories of people like Eric Hersman, like Juliana Rotisch and Ori Okolo, and I'm probably saying the names really wrong, so so some of the founders of Ushahidi. There's many stories, many success stories that we know of, but there's many stories that we don't know of. And I'll pick on one just because I went to see them last month in Buenos Aires, and it's a story of basically some visually disabled people who started digitizing library. And it's, they use the internet. They basically said, we want to share information with people who have the same disability as we have, and they use the internet to do that. They use the internet to find funding. They use the internet to create their idea, to share their idea, and they now have over 8,000 visually impaired people using their libraries. They just won a prize from UNESCO. And so there's many of those stories out there, and I could go on for a couple of hours, which is not the purpose of this session. But I think it's important we hear from all of you as well, that you share those kind of stories. What we've seen, like with those stories, is that those ventures were essentially created online, as I said. And so they're not bound to a geographical ICT cluster. So they're not bound to a place. So what we've seen is that the internet is not only boosting the entrepreneurship, but it's also removing some barriers. It's breaking some barriers, geographical barriers, but it's also some social barriers. It allows people to go beyond their social environment and potentially social limitations as well. So ideally what we would like to see is that we would like to translate the model of the ICT clusters, of the physical ICT, the geographical ICT clusters, to the online model. But we see that we still have some barriers. And so the first barrier is obviously connectivity. And so we need to continue our effort to connect. The next billion is, but more the last billion, I would say, because those are the most difficult ones to connect. So we need to continue in our efforts to connecting the unconnected. In terms of knowledge, to make the parallel there, yes, you have, through the internet, you have potentially access to information, to knowledge, to research. but you still have to train the people on how to use the tool. You still need to train the people on how to use the internet to make the most out of it. So how can they actually use the internet to become innovative? Do they have the digital skills? Do they have the digital? Are they digitally literate? Are some of the questions you have to ask. And so to do the research as well, what you need relevant local content in relevant local languages. In many cases, that is an issue. And so if you want to start a startup in rural, I would say even Flanders, I'm going to take a place in Belgium. People tend to speak, the national language, but not always. And so we need to make sure that the information is available in the local language that is relevant to them to solve their issues. Now, if we then look at the inputs, we know from research that cash flow is most of the time the biggest challenge for entrepreneurs. And so thanks to the internet, we've seen that a lot of entrepreneurs manage to raise money through crowdsourcing platforms and just fundraising tools that you find online. But there's still a lot of limitations on efficient funding mechanisms for startups. So I'd love to hear some more about that from you as well. And so in terms of assistance, yes, you do have access to the world through the internet, but only to as many people are actually online and are using the internet. So you see now that yes, people are using the internet, and yes, it becomes this place where everybody meets, but you still see the creation of some innovation hubs where people physically actually can meet. And I'm gonna name the iHub in Kenya to name just one of the many that we have, but people still need that physical contact, and they still need that physical space to share their ideas and to actually understand, to talk things through, and so on. So it's still an important component. So the last point I want to touch upon is the policy environment. We obviously need to ensure that some of these barriers are removed, and one key way of doing that is actually talking to some of our policymakers and to ensure that the policy environment allows for innovation and allows for startups to be created in an easy way that not only supports the economy but also the startups. The Internet Society, we have a framework that basically describes the enabling environment, and so it's the enabling environment framework. So where we touch upon a number of issues that we feel are important for, generally speaking, an environment that allows for innovation through the internet. What we've seen is that many policymakers have mainly focused on the development of infrastructure. And so the investment in the enabling environment around the development of the internet has been focused fairly much on infrastructure. And the development of the innovation districts, so the ICT clusters, the geographical ones, but not necessarily the creation of organic community of entrepreneurs. And so facilitating their interaction with the traditional industries, the universities, other stakeholders to be successful. So we feel that it is one of the crucial pieces of successful entrepreneurship. So we do live in challenging political times as well, so we need to keep that in mind. We see an increasing discontent with globalization. There is a renewed focus on nationalism in many countries. And so the latest attacks as well on the internet have shown that security is also a main issue, and it's a main concern. So all of this combined are some of the uncertainties that we are facing that we need to keep in mind as well when we talk about the maintenance of the preservation of the opportunities that we have for opportunity. If we want to keep the internet, open, trusted, and accessible to everyone, for innovation, for social and economical growth, then we need to work together to actually maintain the internet as we know it now, and to make sure that we can continue the amazing innovation that is already happening and that we want to continue to encourage. So looking forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joyce, for those remarks, especially the examples of the innovation hubs the entrepreneur holds, and reiterating the promise that the internet holds in terms of permissionless innovation and removal of barriers. At this point in time, you go straight ahead to Ms. Carolina Cairo from LACNIC.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin, and good morning, everyone. My name is Carolina, as Kevin said. I am a coordinator of the FRIDA program. The FRIDA program is an awards and grants program in Latin America and the Caribbean. We are also members of the SEED Alliance, which is a partnership of grants and awards programs. Actually, other than FRIDA in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have FIRE in Africa and ESIF in Asia. Actually, here the coordinator, Silvia Cadena, will also be speaking on the panel today. So just to give you a little context, FRIDA and also the partners from the SEED Alliance, we work on supporting projects that are innovative and that resort to, or harness, I should say, the power of the internet to generate social impact. So today I will be speaking specifically about the experience of the FRIDA program, supporting internet-based solutions for social impact and supporting specifically social entrepreneurs. So the first thing I would like to mention, actually quite aligned with what Joyce mentioned in her remarks, is that what we are seeing is that there is actually great innovation and great entrepreneurial initiatives going on in Latin America and the Caribbean and in the Global South as a whole. What we are seeing through the work of the SEED Alliance, particularly in social projects, is that innovation in our regions is very needs-driven and very much oriented towards problem solving. So here, there's a very interesting TEDx talk, which I assume some of you may have seen from Toby Shapshaks. The TEDx talk is actually called You Don't Need an App for That. And in this TEDx talk, he basically talks about innovation in Africa and how it's better than in other places in the world. So it's quite interesting. I recommend it. And his point in this talk is basically that in the Global South, we often innovate out of necessity. And I think this is a great virtue, in internet-based innovation and entrepreneurship in the Global South, the fact that we innovate out of necessity. Because what we are seeing is that work teams in our regions are not thinking of technology as an end in and of itself, but as a means to basically serve communities and generate social impact. So they're putting technology to work and not necessarily getting entangled in the technology on its own. So in that regard, I would like to quickly mention two examples. So today in the audience, we have actually the award winners of the SEED Alliance 2016 for all three programs. And I would like to quickly showcase as examples the two award winners for the FRIDA program. So we have Margaret Bernard, somewhere there, Margaret and Edward and Felix from Mexico Leaks, Margaret Bernard from AgriNet. So I'll tell you about their projects really quickly. If I'm not doing you guys justice, please feel free to flesh out the idea a little more during the Q&A. So on the one hand, we have AgriNet, which is an e-agriculture project that basically offers a range of ICT solutions to farmers in Trinidad and Tobago. So basically through a range of apps that they have created, they provide farmers access to information on, say, market prices, pests and diseases, and just tools and information just to better manage their production. And we find AgriNet to be essentially a wonderful example of ICTs being used to increase agricultural productivity and perhaps more importantly to help farmers increase their incomes and lift them out of poverty. And on the other hand, we have Mexico Leaks, which is basically an alliance of civil society organizations and independent media outlets here in Mexico. And basically what they have done is they offer a safe and secure platform so that anyone that has information, relevant public information, so that anyone that has relevant information can share it anonymously with its community of journalists. So what they do once they get this information is, they fact check it, and they, prepare news articles, and they have done great work denouncing cases of corruption here in Mexico, human rights abuses, and among others. And again, we find them to be a great example of ICTs being used to empower communities, to encourage civic participation and strengthening democracy here in Mexico. So, of course, it is not all a bed of roses. There are, of course, challenges as well that entrepreneurs and innovators face, again, in Latin America and the Caribbean, but generally in the global South. So, I think the point of today's discussion is also raising those points. So one of the things I would like to bring up is, again, also really aligned with what Joyce mentioned in her remarks. I believe one of the key issues today is still connectivity, internet access, and the digital gap, particularly for social entrepreneurs working in our regions who want to serve disadvantaged communities and rural communities. And that is indeed a big challenge. So here I'd like to share some strategies, if you will, that we from the FRIDA program and also from the Seed Alliance are trying to implement to circumvent this particular challenge. So on the one hand, and I'm quite happy we have Mr. Vincerf here in the audience, last year the Seed Alliance organized at the IGF in Brazil a workshop on innovation and funding. And Mr. Cerf actually mentioned that innovation does not always need to be high-tech. So that's something that at the Seed Alliance we really take at heart. Essentially, we've supported projects that have used very simple technologies or that have incorporated technology in very simple ways, and that has allowed them to generate great social impact. So essentially, I guess you could say seeking low-tech innovation has been quite crucial for this work of the Seed Alliance. And on the other hand, we are also getting involved in projects related to connectivity and connecting the next billion. Specifically now, and we have Carlos here, we're working on a project called Libre Router, which we are funding through the Seed Alliance as a whole, which is a project that's supporting the development of a router, so hardware specifically tailored for the necessities and needs of network communities that we are funding again through the Seed Alliance through one of our interregional grants. So Carlos, again, I invite you to then later on in the Q&A comment about the project on that regard. So I know I'm maybe running out of time, so I'll just wrap up real quick. So another big challenge that I wanted to mention is building capacity among the entrepreneurs themselves. So what I'm going to say may sound like I'm stating the obvious, but what we have found through the Seed Alliance as well is that funding is never enough, that it's key to provide mentorship and capacity building to the project teams that we work with. So basically you have a social leader, a programmer, developer that has become an entrepreneur, and suddenly they need to learn how to develop a business model, they need to learn how to put together a team, do their finances, and so on and so forth. So we find that building those capacity, those skills with entrepreneurs is quite crucial for their success. And the last question or point really that I wanted to mention real quick has to do with the question of funding, which I guess is sort of the big issue, and that always comes up when talking about innovation and entrepreneurship. So here, I think I mentioned it earlier, but the Seed Alliance and the FRIDA program, we specialize in giving small grants. So we work with projects that are at their very sort of early stages of development. But what we keep hearing and what we keep seeing in our regions is that it's very tough for entrepreneurs that are getting started to catch that initial funding that allows them to lift their project off the ground until sufficient risk is removed so that other investors are willing to come in. So that's definitely a weak link that we sort of try to address from the Seed Alliance, but we believe needs a little extra work. And finally, just very last point, also connected to access to funding. Another thing that we've been hearing a lot is that entrepreneurs and innovators are having sometimes like a hard time sort of understanding, or I should say, I don't know, getting to know and navigating the landscape of investors and funding opportunities. So, I think that both from the donors and investors side on the one hand and the entrepreneur side, we need to do a little better at sort of improving the processes through which we find one another. So I think I will leave it at that. Hope I didn't extend too much. Thank you.
No, that's okay, Karina. Thanks very much, especially for that expose on the FRIDA program and by extension CWIS and those considerations on funding. At this point, we're going to call on Mr. Paul Kukubo. He's a board member with the Communications Authority of Kenya and also a serial entrepreneur. Paul? Yes, we have a mic available.
Thank you very much. Because of time, I'll just get right into it. Now, the work I do at the board is that I am responsible for heading the technical committee, which provides licensing and oversees market dissemination. It's not a technical role because I sit at the board level. So obviously, I know what's going on at the authority, but I'm not a technical sort of day-to-day person. I'm on the board of directors. In my life as a serial entrepreneur, that's more interesting, I think, because, first of all, if I can just tease out some things, most entrepreneurs don't live in the world in which policymakers live mentally. They don't understand frameworks, initiatives, efforts, concepts. They don't understand those things. And those who do sometimes know how to deal with those issues better than they know how to run a business. And that's an important thing to understand. I've met entrepreneurs who had no idea about the concept of raising capital, who had very good ideas about business, but did not understand that their world existed in which there was people who have a pot of money on the other side who make a living out of giving you money in your business. And it speaks to an issue about the Global South. It's a very different structure, the Global South. I mean, when you talk about the Global South, you don't mean the more romantic, animals running in the wild. And what you're talking about is countries that have serious problems with infrastructure, where water doesn't run properly, where roads are not smooth, where school fees is not paid on time, where schools have no windows, where taxes are not used well. And so they just, when an entrepreneur emerges out of this context, he's a very battle-scarred guy. And sometimes, and I think many of my colleagues have said it before, is necessity drives it. So some of the work we did, I mean, I was previously, just in terms of disclosure, I previously ran the ICT board, which is now the ICT authority in Kenya, and I was responsible for information communication development. And one of the things we said was that many entrepreneurs had to be exposed to how the government worked and how industry worked in order for them to respond to those opportunities. And let me give an example here. I've been in some hackathons where I've seen entrepreneurs develop applications. And all they do is write applications for what they understand. So I went to one hackathon where they all, in a university where they all wrote programs about how to automate the dining room process, because it took them a long time to queue and get their food, or the library process. That's the only business they've been exposed to, except maybe a small mom and pop shop in the rural area. So how does a guy like that then emerge and form a company that can solve a global problem? He can't, because he's not exposed to that global problem. He's only exposed theoretically in the classroom, and it's very distant from him. And so when you talk about some of the things that you need to do, I would suggest perhaps that there needs to be an intervention in building entrepreneurship confidence and exposure to the global problem set, especially in their own environments, and also how to interpret those problems as solvable by some of the technology they have. I'm involved in a company, and I know we don't plug companies we're involved with, but I'm involved in a company that is doing some work in the agricultural sector to develop what we call grower management systems. And what they're trying to do is basically go into farms, give farm owners technology about how to manage their farms, how to put in crop yield, how to record what they grow, when they go to a warehouse, how to record that the product that they've taken to a warehouse has actually been received, warehouse receipt systems. And these guys are so advanced now, the team that I've been involved in is so advanced now, they're now beginning to look at rolling it out on a global scale and even adopting blockchain technology in terms of registering farmers and registering warehouses and that sort of thing. So this is an example of taking a problem, understanding it from a granular and from a rural setting, and then applying knowledge that you've gathered over time, courtesy of the internet, courtesy of exposure, and to solving it. Now, I don't want to repeat many of the things that my colleagues have said with respect to the fact that you need venture capital, you need mentorship, you need government policy that works, you need environments that support business, you need a culture that says it's okay to be a business person. But one of the things that I want to maybe emphasize is this. The barriers to entry in terms of starting a technology-based business are not as high in terms of saying I can write an app. It's not as high. But the barriers to scale are very, very high. There are very few companies that I have seen in the African context, and I operate both within Kenya and South Africa now, where I spend a lot of time, that have actually got both the ability and, more importantly, the mentality to say, I can scale. It's too, in fact, many of them actually don't want to scale, because what it is they want to do the business to get cash, put that cash in their pocket, and do other things with that money. It's a necessity. And so it also colors the kind of entrepreneurship we have. So you find many of the people I started business with are now working for banks. They're working for corporate organizations because they cannot sustain their business. And those who are able to sustain their business have got maybe a certain mentality that allows them to do it. So one of the things that I maybe can tease out as well is when we did our master plan a few years ago, we sort of looked at several things. We looked at saying that ICT has to be an enabler of public value creation by enabling the public sector, which is so important in emerging markets in the global south, to do its business better. That already is a problem set enough to keep many entrepreneurs busy. How to pay bills, how municipalities can become more efficient, how services can be delivered better. Let me tease out an example here. In South Africa, I'm involved with a company that is now looking at creating a model where people who want to purchase electricity can purchase it cooperatively, because they can purchase electricity tokens by almost borrowing from a pool which they have collectively invested in, using trust among themselves, what we're calling communities of trust, so that if you're borrowing on the phone, somebody can write a phone feature that sort of verifies that you're who you are, and also that you're trustworthy because you're a member of this community. And then you can raise cash by typing in a certain number, and then your phone operator or the borrower, the lender can actually advance a little bit credit on the phone to be able to enable you to do this. Now that's taking an example of something that, a social context, and applying it to solving a problem. Another example, and I think maybe examples sometimes illustrate better the point than perhaps anything else, is BRIC. Now, you talked about BRIC. I think just in terms of disclosure, I sit on the board of BRIC. So Eric and those other entrepreneurs who have mentioned are pretty good friends of mine, and I've known them for a long time. But BRIC is an example of a company that's taken the connectivity problem in Africa and said, look, rural connectivity is a problem. There is no electricity. People need to be connected, and it's creating a new business model which provides connectivity as a router, which caches content at the edge of the network, and uses an advertising model so that you can access the internet for free in exchange for viewing content that's supported by advertising in order to spread content around. So there's very many good examples of entrepreneurs who are responding to the challenges in the Global South. Now, I feel that maybe governments can do more. I've always felt that governments can do more. I'm in government and I've been in government before, but I cannot emphasize that governments can do more. One of the reasons why governments can do more is this. If you look at the formation of a lot of these hubs, good as it may be, it speaks to a gap in the university environment. Yeah, so you have a lot of hubs that are not, they don't have the sort of Stanford Silicon Valley relationship, which is high-end research, high thinking. So labs are important, like the IHAB is important, but they always have what you call academic limitation. Academic limitation meaning that they can have the challenge, and not always, but they can have the challenge, if they're not properly run, they can have the challenge of perpetuating a hobbyist mentality towards application development. Because it's easy, it's fun. Let me try and do this application. So you need a bit of rigor and a bit of people coming in and saying, look, guys, this problem exists. And some of them have done a good job of it. I think the IHAB has done a good job of it, where you bring in, you interface industry, people coming in the evenings and talking about their issues, and then it encourages people more to be able to create new ideas. So I think that's one of the, but universities in Africa, many of who are stretched, constrained with academic resources and finances, and then are not providing the entrepreneurship nurseries, the nursery that we need for entrepreneurship in the way that others may. And I would encourage governments to see this as being a necessary part of the relationship between research, academics, industry, because it's a safe space, universities are a safe space, and this will happen. And you see the difference when you go to places like Stellenbosch in South Africa, and I spent a bit of time there, met a few entrepreneurs who are out of those universities, and you see that they, maybe because Stellenbosch is a little bit more of a privileged environment, you see that the kind of entrepreneurs who are turning out in that environment tend to have a mentality of doing solutions that are sometimes scalable, yes, but also because of their social context, you'll find that many of them are writing applications for Europe. They live in Europe mentally. They mentally live in Europe, they do European type solutions, and they get venture capital to come in and they scale because people can understand what it is they're trying to do. They've got the language to talk to VCs. They understand what you mean by seed A, Series A funding, Series B funding. They understand all that language. Most of the guys who I've dealt with in other markets have no idea. And so there's a bit of a maturity issue going on. So I think to end it, I just want to end by saying that I think this is encouraging, and you'll find that there are more entrepreneurs in Africa in the ICT than most people have any idea about. Many who die on the roadside with their ideas, die meaning the ideas die without anybody ever hearing about them, simply because they don't have the courage, channel, confidence, finance, or the social aptitude to actually take the ideas forward.
Thanks very much, Paul. I think you've really hit a high note there, highlighting the structural and systematic challenges that are faced in the Global South, especially that disconnect between policy worlds and the worlds that our entrepreneurs and innovators live in. All right, and now on to Sylvia from APNIC.
Hi, my name is Silvia Cadena. I'm the head of programs of the IPNIC Foundation. One of the programs that we coordinate is the IGF Asia Fund, which supports small grants and awards in the Asia-Pacific region from Afghanistan all the way to the Pacific Islands. We cover 56 economies. Well, again, same as Paul, I don't want to repeat anything that my colleagues have already said. I'm really grateful for Carolina's mentions about the Seed Alliance and the work that Frida, FIRE, and IGF are doing together to bring a little bit of light to the innovators that, as you said, kind of let their ideas on the side of the road because they didn't just have the opportunity. So I think there are, that one of the main challenges for innovation and entrepreneurship in the Global South is that a lot of the work that we do is based, or that we see that other people are doing, is based on assumptions. It's not based on soul-searching analysis and really understanding and asking others that actually think very differently from how we think. It's like we follow those on Twitter or Facebook that kind of think the way we think and live life the way we see it, and you guys, we kind of, more people do unfriend the ones that don't, or just take the notifications off. And that switching off of things that are happening when you are actually working, not on your social life, also means that a lot of apps and solutions that are out there are actually disconnected from the views of others on the other side that might experience the problem on a different, from a different approach. So I think that when we are in a space like the IGF, when we talk about a multi-stakeholder approach to problems, it's like, okay, if picking up again on the Libre Router project that I have in front of me, and my friend Carlos that is doing such great work, when you have a problem about access in communities, and you have someone in university looking at it from a university angle or an academic angle, and you have people on the other side of the world that are working on, from Argentina, Altermundi, that is working more at the community side, and you have a different kind of business models that they are pushing in Senseleni networks in Africa, and then you have different parties looking at the same problem from a different angle, then that's the way the multi-stakeholder approach to problems actually work. So you may have different views, you may have different ways of solving problems, and we are not working only on assumptions. So I think that one of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurship in innovation in the Global South is that we are not actually listening to each other. We are just preaching to the converter, or the converted already, talking to the same people that think the same thing, and kind of a lot of clapping on the back saying, oh yes, you're doing it great, but it's a good exercise to just dive in and try to be challenged by those that are on the other side of the fence and be uncomfortable by those concepts that we don't agree with. Because that's the way that scale actually happens. Scale happens when people from different views and different ways of seeing things actually agreed that a solution or an app or a device works for them, and they personalize it, they live it in a different way. So I think that one of the big assumptions that is out there is that a lot of entrepreneurs are assuming that the infrastructure is actually there, that there are pathways to have that infrastructure working. So I'm going to put, again, going back to examples that make a little bit of sense. In the Pacific Islands, for example, lots of hackathons and innovation hubs or attempts to have a hub to promote innovation and coding and apps and things happening. And then when they have it all done and they put their PayPal button at the end so that you can process it, and then voila, there is a restriction on payments from the Pacific Islands because there was money laundering issues going on. So you cannot pay with PayPal or receive funds via PayPal on several, if not all, of the Pacific Islands. So off you go. All your hard work, all the app was done, all the payment solution was done, and it is not going to work. So lots of the developers, for example, that work in the Pacific Islands, if they want to be paid, let's say, through a, like a telework kind of system, they have to have bank accounts in New Zealand to be able to get the money, and then they need a niece or a nephew or an auntie that sends the money in the next flight in, and it gets to this reality of how it all actually works. So assuming that the infrastructure is there, and assuming that infrastructure alone is going to generate the change, is just, is not my point of just talk to the people on the other side that are doing the other bit, so that you actually get an understanding of what the environment actually is, if it is receptive or not to the applications or the systems or the solutions or the devices that you are designing. So it is, I know it is a challenge. It's not that easy to find those that think differently to us, that are doing things differently to us. It is much easier to find common ground with those that things like us. But it is a part of a strategy. If you really want to solve the problems of the world, if we really want the SDGs to really have an app for that, one app, as Carolina mentioned, if we really have these 17 massive issues that we want to solve to make the world a better place, we have a game with a colleague used to work at Cisco about trying to locate like cards on a table with the Sustainable Development Goals and try to identify which ones are actually contributing to which, and which ones are contributing to two or more, so that there is some connections between those two, to try to explain it to others that might actually be looking at these issues from the policy perspective. So I think there might be an app for that, right? Or there might not be one, but there is definitely a framework to understand what the problems of the world are and what your contribution to those is, and to take it seriously. For that, I think that it is very important that the strategy, again, is not based on assumptions and is not based on comfort. It is really comfortable to talk only with those that speak, share the same views that we are. And the strategy is that one that is actually taking into consideration other views. And as my grandmother used to say, it's not good to have only plan B. You need to have plan Z 260, because you're really never gonna know, you really don't know what life is gonna throw at you. My colleagues also mentioned about visibility and how visibility sometimes makes a whole difference. I don't think that there are better innovations in a specific in Africa or better innovations in Asia, but I think the three of us, my colleague Mwenda in Africa, my colleague Carolina in Latin America, and myself in the Asia Pacific, we're kind of competing, to make sure that our winners are, showcased here, and that innovation coming from Mexico and coming from Trinidad and Tobago and coming from Ghana and the Gambia and Malaysia and the Philippines. Raise your hands, guys. Tindak Malaysia at the back, and CivisNet from the Philippines at the back, which are my award winners, the ASIF award winners. Get their chance, get the spotlight, because yes, there is lots of people working on electoral systems and mapping, like Tindak Malaysia is. There are lots of other people working on access for rural areas and disaster communication, like CivisNet Foundation is. But they are here. So take your time to get to meet them, because yes, the others are not here. They have the visibility, and you take it responsibly, It's like the opportunities come also with a responsibility. We have responsibility to be in a place like this and try to talk with people that do not agree with you, that think differently, that see life differently, and to come back home thinking, okay, what is my contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals, to this framework, and how can I make other people's life better? But, it's not only about feeling comfortable, it's about taking it seriously and doing it right.
Thanks very much, Sylvia. Thank you. And thank you for that strategy you've provided in reducing assumptions and also being able to understand a problem from different facets using a multi-stakeholder approach and being comfortable with being uncomfortable, if I'm not mistaken. Great. And last but not least, we have Sergio Araiza from Social Tech Mexico. Thank you.
Yeah, apologize for my colleague, Juan Manuel, which is already, is not here, but he say hello and say that hope you enjoyed the IGF in Mexico. So just a little introduction about what Social Tech is. Social Tech is a small NGO based in Mexico City, but mostly we work in Latin America. We try to have a Latin America perspective about social change and social entrepreneurship and innovation. So I would like to use my participation using 3 examples of what innovation means for the Latin America context. And actually I will present 3 groups, 3 small groups of different topics that they are innovating in the different contexts. So I would like to start with Voto Público, Voto Joven, which is a small NGO based in Venezuela. They are a small group of journalists, a small group of developers who in the last years are working in different activities related to electoral process, in elections. And actually, this is a really good example of what innovation means for us, because for us, innovation, at least in the social change or social change maker, is that the capacity to be receptive of what is happening around you. For instance, you mentioned it in the last participation that Ushahidi, I don't know if you have in mind what is Ushahidi. I don't know what it is. Ushahidi is a platform to enables the capacity to participate around the SMS or around the tweeting or Facebook or whatever. So for Venezuelan people, or for the Venezuelan context, for the people from Venezuela, the capacity to be part of the election is a thing that it can change realities. In the last, I think that in the last 5 years, Venezuela had a couple of elections, presidential elections, that probably you can hear a lot of them. So for this small group, the capacity to use Ushahidi was the possibility to be connected with other parts of the world. For instance, they already are exchanging knowledge and they are exchanging experiences that they had in the Latin America context, and now they have the capacity to build new and better libraries for this application, for this software. So innovation is the possibility to solve, the possibility that the people has to solve problems that they can see around their context. This is one example of the capacity to us to adopt new and better technology that they are already used in other places like Africa. The second group that I want to present, that I would like to present to you, is Ojo Público, which is a small startup based in journalism. They are based in Peru. These Peruvian guys, as I say, they are outliers, journalists. Thank you so much. That's a hard word for Spanish speakers. This group is a small group of journalists that in the last 2 years they are rethinking how the journalist is for Peruvian guys, for the Peruvian people. They already are using data, the open data process and transparency process, to enhance democracy and enhance participation, and actually to enhance the capacity to show what is happening in the government, into the government. Remember that Latin America, and actually related to the SDGs agenda, that is one of the biggest challenges that our region has in the next 10 years for this agenda. So now they are, as I say, they are rethinking how the journalists looks like into their context, but at the same time they are innovating the way that they are presenting the histories, and they are presenting the cases of corruption of or the transparency that they had in the last year. They be part of the Panama Papers, the Panama Papers investigation, research. Thank you. And now they're presenting month after month a new and a better history of corruption that they have. So the problem here is that, okay, how many histories they need to show to impact the ecosystem and to get the final goal that they has, which is the social change. So that's a really good example of how to use technology for the journalists and how to enable the capacity to be in touch with the people. Yeah. So in my third example, my last example, I will like to present to you Codeando Mexico, which is other NGO, a small NGO, a civic hacker group, which actually they are around here, that they are building Codeando Mexico, which is a small NGO that they are building apps to enable the civic participation, through technology, civic participation through technology. And now they are building platforms and they are building apps to, as I say, build participation. But the example of the key question of this is how to think or how to enable participation in contexts where the people has not technology or has not a connectivity, as you mentioned it. Now they are pushing a new agenda into the Congress in Mexico to enable the participation around using technology or using these apps. But the problem is the policymakers, they don't think or they don't believe the impact that the technology has in the democracy, into our democracy, because we need to rethink the way that the policy are made. For instance, the policy in Mexico was made in the last century. So now we need to start to think, and actually that's the key point of this part is that it's not about technology or what the technology can do for you. It's about how the technology can change the social environment, but at the same time how to reduce the asymmetries between people which has the power or the capacity among the people who has not the possibility to be part of the conversation. And actually that's the point. How to start a new conversation using technology to enhance the capacities and the human rights for people who has not been represented in the last century. So obviously this is only 3 examples of what we are doing in Latin America. Obviously we have more examples, but for us is the possibility to start this kind of conversation, exchanging technology, exchanging knowledge, and actually exchanging experiences that in the last years we had. Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks very much, Sergio. Thank you for those examples of social innovations. And I liked especially how they were focused on a concrete problem, which is specifically good governance and civic participation in Latin American societies. At this point in time, we are going into what we call the group discussion, the discussion en famille. And of course, as Sylvia and others have mentioned, we have people in the room, we have people who have done it, who have been there. The idea is that we really just want to have an exchange of ideas, and we'll call on anyone, even our remote participants, to be able to make contributions at this point. Just as a reminder, the first question or the first consideration we are looking at is challenges and opportunities for innovators and entrepreneurs in the Global South. And of course, we are looking as well within that the shortcomings of development actions. So at this point, I'd like to open up the floor to anyone to make a comment, and recognize Mr. Vincent.
Thank you. Now, how am I going to do this so that I hate to speak to you from the back, so I'll stand here. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, of course.
I apologize for putting my back in front of the panel. First of all, I want to draw your attention to a very interesting experiment which is going on here in Mexico in the poorest and most rural parts. There's a company called Gallup. They made their business polling people to find out what their opinions were, but they have decided to branch out now into discovering the strengths that people have, and in particular, they're trying to find out what are the entrepreneurial skills that people have, and it's not necessarily the case that somebody who is very smart is also prepared to be an entrepreneur. So they invented some tests to try to figure out who is ready to be an entrepreneur. They tested 15,000 young people who were in the high school age, and they found 15 of them that looked like, based on the test, would be capable of starting and running a business. One of them is a young girl who noticed in Mexico that some people were getting fat and that this threatened their health because they had a possibility of diabetes. And so she wanted to start a healthy candy company. So, and she tested really well in this entrepreneurship thing. So the Gallup people decided to test their test, and they gave money to her and advice so she could start her candy company. Now, this is just still in the process, so I don't have a result yet. But the idea that finding entrepreneurs is not so simple is very important. Not everyone is ready for that. I'm sure you can attest to that just based on what you told us this morning. So that's point number one. And Mr. Chairman, may I make a second point? So the second one has to do with what we are measuring. And I was struck by the fact that we always tend to measure how many startups there are and how much money went into the startups. That's not the important metric. The important metric is how many startups survived. Now, we all know, certainly from the Silicon Valley experience, that when you put money into a startup, 80 to 85 or even 90% of the time, it doesn't work. And it doesn't work for a lot of different reasons. So it's important for us to understand how is our success going to, what fraction of the startups do we have? Are we having successes at all? Because it won't be good if we put lots of money into lots of startups and none of them work. So I want to hear some statistics about the success stories, what fractions of them have succeeded. I have other things to say, but I will return the microphone because everyone else has things to say too.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Siv. Anyone else? Challenges, opportunities? I recognize Margaret, and then, right, yes. Please make sure to introduce yourself for the benefit of all of our participants.
Okay. Hi, I'm Margaret Bernard from Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm one of the Frida awardees for AgriNet. But my contribution here is not really on AgriNet. Both Caroline and Paul made a comment about capacity building for entrepreneurship. And I wanted to share something with you about what our university, the University of the West Indies, is doing in that area. We have a course, we've introduced a new course in the MSc program on entrepreneurship and intellectual property. We have many of our graduates who are interested in commercialization and business opportunities. And this course is a collaboration with industry in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Caribbean on the whole. And it really provides a lot of information and experience from successful persons in terms of entrepreneurship, and particularly also the intellectual property, which is not very often talked about or discussed, but is really a critical part of entrepreneurship. The second program that we have that I wanted to mention quickly is a program where we pull together persons who have very innovative ideas, and basically we fund them for a period and leave them freely to roam with their ideas. We do a lot of mentorship with these students and just allow them to develop their ideas. And through that and through some of our contacts with industry, we help to provide funding for them so to be able to take them to the next stage. I was particularly interested in this set of questions to be able to identify who really have that entrepreneurial skill. So probably I'll follow up on that bit as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. And there was, yes, could you? And then,
Hello, everyone. My name is Marcela Paiva, and I'm from the government of Chile. I work in the mission of Chile to the World Trade Organization and World Intellectual Property Organization. This has been a very interesting panel, and I just would like to ask two questions. So one would be in terms of the public policies, because I've heard different things around the panel about sometimes only focusing on infrastructure, but at the same time that infrastructure is one of the main challenges that we have. But looking forward, while we are working on infrastructure, what other issues are important? I heard capacity building, also the environment that I would think it means, networking. In concrete terms, what we could do as governments to help in this process to get to a positive outcome in terms of innovation. And the second one has to do with transfer of technology. This is an issue that we discuss a lot in Geneva in different forums. UNCTAD discuss it, WTO discuss it, we discuss it also in WIPO, like everyone's talk about this, but it's very difficult to put this into concrete terms, and if it's really important, and exactly what we need to do to foster these, and what role it has in fostering the innovation process. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Given that this is both a Q&A and a comment period, it's an exchange, I'll probably ask any of our speakers to probably field that question, and then we can move on to comments. Yes, Sylvia.
Just from, well, I'm originally from Colombia, so I kind of jump between Latin America and Asia Pacific where I work. But I just wanted to thank you for pointing the issue around policy framework and how it is discussed in places where a lot of us do not participate in the issues around copyright, which is very, very important. Again, I guess that probably connects to the point about talking with the people that think differently to us. A lot of the things that we support are Creative Commons, and the idea is that they share what they have learned and that the innovation is openly accessible. And a lot of the people that we don't talk with are the ones that are on the copyright side of the table, let's say. And a lot of the entrepreneurs have issues around dealing with the intellectual property that they have developed. So there are treaties and decisions that are made at the government level that go on top of all the conversations that we have around intellectual property that probably we are not even aware of because we are not participating in those spaces. So one of the things that I think the governments could do very well in terms of how they inject information to their innovation spaces is to make sure that they are aware of the different ways intellectual property can be managed. Not only patents, but other alternatives. So the licensing promotes innovation and not, sometimes we've seen cases where they go the patent way, let's say, and that actually generates restrictions for them to grow later on. So there are issues there. And then on your question about the policy side of things, there are the Australian agenda, for example, pushes to try to take the economy out of the mining industry alone, which was called the mining boom, to the innovation boom. Just by boom, I mean, it's a lot of boom. It's just that. It's not structured in a way that, not by changing a name and thinking that you have a document, then things will fall in properly. So the policy, as Carolina mentioned before, and also Paul, the policy is an instrument, but if it's not linked to what is actually happening and how people can access those mechanisms, then is this assumption that entrepreneurs are going to have great ideas, and because they're great, they're going to have access to funding, and because they have access to funding, they're going to succeed. That's not the case. So I think the policy framework has to be as flexible and as crazy, let's say, as this environment, as this space is. And entrepreneurs are under a lot of stress to generate jobs, to change the world, to do a better place, and sometimes that just doesn't deliver to the promise. And I think that the policy should address those issues and give them the possibility to have, tax exemptions for at least 5 years so that they can build a business. Encouraging for the number of employment that they develop, so that the number of women that they employ, things that are stimuli for what they're doing, but that's the policy. The policy should not say, if you don't have the word innovation on your business case, we don't support you, or if you are older than 35, you're not eligible, which is, and sometimes is that what policy actually means. So I guess my call will be to, be more inclusive in the policy, think about out of the box a little bit, and try to include the copyright issues.
Thank you. And Joyce, and then we'll go back to...
I see a lot of hands, so I'll make it very short. I think there's, from my perspective, there's two things which we touched upon a little bit. Education, obviously, looking at ensuring that the younger generation, and I say this as a mom as well, so I have a personal interest, that the younger generation actually is raised with a more entrepreneurship mind. I think the schooling system is still very traditional. I mean, let's just say it. I live in Luxembourg, I'm Belgian, I have an Italian husband, it's complicated. But the schooling system in the three countries where we are linked to is still very traditional. It's still very, we just, you teach the stuff, you learn the stuff, but you don't actually learn to create innovation, to think innovatively, it's not part of it. So I think that's one of the pieces. The other piece which we didn't really talk about is the digital economy piece. And I'll take a very controversial example that we probably all have used these days, Uber. It's a big issue, it's a big discussion in many countries. The taxation issues, the taxation regulation around innovation, and I'm taking Uber just as one example, but there's many, many more, is you need to look as government, you also need to look at innovation doesn't stop at the border anymore. And so when you're an entrepreneur and you create new things thanks to the internet, as I mentioned, you break the geographical barriers, but it also means that you as governments have the responsibility to work with your colleagues from other countries to ensure that those limitations are also enabled, or not enabled, but disabled, I would say. So to ensure that you allow that entrepreneurship to use the internet as a tool, as a cross-border, as a global tool, but that you also enable that from a government and from a policy-making perspective.
Sorry,
thank you.
Let me just chime in. You know, this need for this search for a silver bullet is actually the wrong paradigm, in my view. The government's thinking that there's a template somewhere in some university that's going to say, this is how you create entrepreneurs. That's a wrong paradigm. We've been asking this question in so many conferences. It doesn't work. I think everything is about context. An entrepreneur in Chile or Germany has a different context. What I say, in fact, for me, the issue is not so much about entrepreneurship, it's about enterprise development. Some of them are actually, some of the people who might start businesses are better suited buying a franchise of something that actually works and setting up a business with an established business format for which there's not much thinking required. And then they get it to run. And it will still be a viable business, and then they can layer on whatever they want to layer on top of that. So if you're a dealer, for example, you're a Microsoft reseller in a place that requires licensing, that's a good business. And in the global south, you have a lot of need for even those businesses. The role of entrepreneurship is to solve problems that are not emergent, that can't be solved by someone else, by applying context and an opportunity to that problem. So I know my colleague talked about Uber and the fact that we have to worry about global scaling. But when you get to that point, it's a different problem. It's a very sophisticated problem worrying about international law, international licensing. In fact, in my sense, I mean, as an entrepreneur myself, if I get to that point, it's a good place to be because I need expensive lawyers. It's something else. At this stage, the issue that we have in the global south is that we don't have enough people that say, this door is locked, I need to create a key that opens this door. That for me is the conversation.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Of course, there's one challenge we have right now, which is time. But seeing that we actually are a bit into the second question, what I want is to have one more reaction in this part from the gentleman in the front who will introduce himself, and then we have a remote. Great.
How many are successful? How many are failed?
Right.
I know I should be answering that question because I'm one of the project managers for the
You want
Yes.
to take the mic,
So-
actually, because
so-
otherwise...
Yeah.
Yes. Exactly.
So my name is Mwendwa Kivuva, the project manager for Fire Africa. I work with Carolina and Sylvia. So there's this very important question that Vinton Safa had asked about the impact of the projects that we have funded.
Yes.
But that question does not only go to Seed Alliance because our funding is just a dot in the ocean, a drop in the ocean. That question, I think, is something we should be able to explore more.
Certainly.
See how much money is thrown into projects and how many actually germinate and grow into something.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, Mendwa. And Mendwa, he's referring exactly to the second part, where we are looking more so at those projects, those implementation cases, and the details surrounding it. We want to get some of the learned lessons, funding, and otherwise, and also some of the practices that we may want to share, not only from Seed Alliance, but anyone else in the room. So just to finish the first part, I recognize this gentleman, and then we are already into the second part, but the focus will shift after your intervention.
Hello, good morning everyone. My name is Carlos Rey Moreno. I work for the University of the Western Cape and also in Senseleni Networks. My point would be related to the Seed Alliance and the importance of how sometimes we are facing the same issues in the global south and creating solutions that may tackle problems that are faced across the regions. And I think in that case, I completely prize the interregional grant that is allowing, in this case, organizations in South America, in Argentina in particular, and in an organization in South Africa to work together to tackle the problems, in this case, the inexistence of hardware and software that can solve some of the issues that we are facing in the community networks community. In the community networks community, what we are trying to do is to create what we are calling gig-free technologies, so any communities can actually provide themselves with their own connectivity. This tackles very well in most of the discussions that we've been having around these days on connecting the next billion, and how these type of technologies and problems that are most of the 4 billion that are still to be connected are in the global south. And by creating and having funds to tackle the hardware and software needs to create solutions that may tackle these problems could be an interesting way. In that sense, also something that I wanted to say very quickly is that you were saying about local knowledge to create local solutions, and I think in this sense, community networks are an enabler of creating local entrepreneurship. I just was organizing the first summit on community networks in Africa a couple of weeks ago, and 10 representatives of community networks in Africa were there, and the 10 of them are providing ICT skills and digital entrepreneurship in the community centers that these community networks are building. So it's enabling innovation to enable more innovation. So I think that's very important as well. And going back to the impact and to the entrepreneurial skills, well, myself, I'm an academic and an activist, and I don't have entrepreneurial skills. So we are jumping into a space that we might not have all the skills and experience to make this succeed. So we are very happy of those mentoring programs and any other tips that I may hear in the next round of the session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Carlos. And we'll straight into the next session. So again, we would like to have any reactions, questions, comments dealing with the implementation or the specific innovation and entrepreneurship cases, any lessons that you have learned, any practices you would like to share. And of course, we take into consideration Mr. Cerf's comment, which dealt specifically on some of those finer details. So the floor is open. Any of our, okay, yeah, of course, Mr. Of course.
All right, so this time I'll stand here because the camera is over there. I want to draw attention to something that a company called McDonald's does. They have lots and lots of franchises, And so that's an opportunity for someone to start a business, in effect, under a franchise arrangement. The reason I bring this up is that they have an organization they call Hamburger University. And they basically bring people who are going to run a McDonald's franchise to the university to teach them about how to do it. They teach them about the rules, the Federal Food and Drug Administration rules for safety of food and so on, how to be efficient, how to hire people, how to fire people if you have to. The reason I bring this up is I wonder whether we should have schools like that for people who want to start businesses. Google has tried a little bit to do that. We started a thing called Campus. There's one in London, and I think we have some others as well. This is a building full of people with ideas and entrepreneurial ambition, and we bring Googlers there to be advisors. But it feels to me, basically what Paul was saying is that the people with the entrepreneurial ideas don't necessarily have all of the pieces that they need to make it into a business. So we should find a way to help them do that.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? Yes, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, I'm Jeffrey from the Philippines. I'm also a recipient of the IGF Awards. I just like to share the experience in the Philippines right now, because it's different. Our main concern is the migration of talents. As you know, Philippines is known for business processing and outsourcing. But our main concern, most of our talents are moving towards Singapore, Australia, New Zealand. So we have BPOs, but most of them, their workers are medical staff, nurses. There are some jokes in the Philippines that if you want to get some heart attack, the best place is the call centers, because 90% are nurses or doctors. So right now, my concern is how to keep this talent in the Philippines, how to keep this talent at the local areas. They said that we are very fortunate because our second language is English. For me, it's good and it's bad also, because most of the people goes away. They went to the US, they went to Australia. So it's a double-edged sword. So my concern right now is how to keep this talent. I've been working with so many startups, and they never have any chance to boom their businesses because they have been absorbed to different big countries. We have government scholars. The government scholars have been spent by hundreds of thousands of pesos until they graduate. But what happened? The bright ones, the intellectuals, when the Japanese government or any government saw them, they will pay the total amount the government invested for the students. So they, at an early age, I see it, they go to Japan, they go to the US. So I think it's also very important that to keep those birds at the nest, we must have to nurture them until such time they can take off. That's my experience in the Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you for that experience. Any other experiences that we would like to share, lessons learned, practices at this point? I think we have still, yes, I'm seeing a gentleman here, yes.
Hello, I am Aliuso. I'm from the Gambia, actually one of the recipients for the Seed Alliance for Africa Fire Award. Basically, my organization, what we do is train young people, especially girls in the rural areas, on how to code, build website, and train them on entrepreneurship and other business initiatives. But one of the challenges that we face is funding. Sometimes I do tell people it's not like, shouldn't be the reason to stop people from doing what you're supposed to do. Most of the time, what is important is commitment. And sometimes we oversight these financial institutions like the banks when we are having initiatives like this. I believe they can be a very important partner in such conferences because they have what we call the corporate social responsibilities funds that they can give to emerging young groups in order to implement activities. We have this experience in the Gambia. Most of the microfinance institutes, some of them do provide, but not to a certain level. But I feel if they are inspired at forums like this, it can be a catalyst for change in order to be giving more of those funds, especially to young emerging organizations or groups who are inspiring change in their communities. Thank you.
Thank you for that exchange. I think we probably have time for just one more reaction, and then we'll wrap up there.
Yeah, my name is Mia Twin from Myanmar. I'm also a former recipient of IGF grant. I'm not here under IGF, but under different category. So from what I have observed here, I think one of the panelists has mentioned about the funding as well, right? It is limited, always challenging. And the other has mentioned about the, scaling up of the startups. So if we put that together, for example, the lady here, she has mentioned about a very good project they are doing, AgriNet, yeah? So yeah, this kind of solution, maybe we can replicate that. We can use very small funding and then replicate that in like my country. And it could be very successful as well. So it's an idea to scale up for them as well as a solution for us. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. I think I'm being told we have at least room for, yes. So we'll have these last two reactions, and then we're being innovative with our use of time. So the gentleman to the front, and then, yes.
My name is Caleb Ndaka from Kenya, and straight to the question. I'm glad of the so many case studies mentioned from Kenya. My question, question rather will be to Paul. We know that in South, the global South, more than 70% of the population stays in rural areas. Most of the case studies mentioned about Kenya mainly have been captured from the capital. What happens to the 70%?
Well, we'll take, yes, the last reaction, and then Paul can answer it collectively, yeah.
My name is June Tessie. I'm a youth at IGF and the ISOC fellow here, but I'm a lawyer in Kenya. And so my advice to all the innovators and entrepreneurs, this is just a comment, is protect your intellectual property. There's no other way that you'd be protected from the rest of the world. So protect your innovation and your intellectual property. It's critical. No, you don't agree?
What I say is there are different ways of dealing with intellectual property. Mike, here. What I said is that there are different ways of dealing with intellectual property. Find the one that suits you, but
Yeah,
just make
true.
sure that you find one.
That's true.
And
That-
that could be
exactly.
Creative Commons, and that could be
Exactly.
completely open and out there, but just
Exactly,
think
that's
about
true.
it.
I
Not
agree.
only protect it.
I agree. So find what suits you as well. Yes, that's true.
Find what suits you.
But the biggest problem we've had is people don't protect the IP, which is a big problem in the South. Yeah, they don't know as well. Yes.
Right.
Thank you. And Paul, to answer the previous question.
Okay, I think all I'll say is that I made my point earlier when I said that a lot of innovations are getting lost by the wayside. And this rural-urban divide in Kenya and in many African countries is part of the problem. For example, if you live in a rural area and come from a rural school and have no exposure to urbanization, you'll find that even the uptake of some of what you're trying to do doesn't have the space, and also your own confidence to be able to do a business doesn't apply in the same way. You find that most of the successful people will have to come into an urban area and deploy their technology innovation in that space. The infrastructure, the culture, the uptake is just not there. So you'll find that there are some, I know one young company that was involved in a project to try and do something in transport. And these guys are originally from a rural setting, came into Nairobi, and they were able to do it. So just like in other countries in the world, there are areas where businesses tend to cluster around, and the support systems to support them exist in those areas. So Nairobi, at this point in time within Kenya, plays that role. That shouldn't be the case, but it's just what it is.
Thank you, Paul. Unfortunately, we have come to that time, and I think we have generated so much fruitful discussion here that we will continue outside of the room. But at this time, I would just like to thank our speakers. I think we had a diverse set of speakers, diverse regions, gender equality matched. And of course, thanks to all of you here for being able to share your experiences and raise your concerns and questions here with us. So I'd like to thank you all, and I do wish you a very fruitful rest of your day.